Hi, this is Kent Anderson of the Disrupted Science podcast. I'm here with my co-author of the forthcoming book, How the Internet Disrupted Science, Joy Moore. And we are bringing this to you on Friday, September 12th, 2025. Hi, Joy.
Hey Kent, how's it going?
It's going really well. As you know, we just finished a great interview with Olivia Guest and Iris Van Roy, and they are two AI experts who recently put out a position paper against unskeptical acceptance of AI technologies in academia that has been making quite a stir. And we wanted to get an interview as quickly as we could, and they're great, right?
Yeah, we were so lucky that they took the time to talk to us. We came across their work and it just kind of immediately hit home. It was refreshing to get their perspective of two accomplished professors who actually teach AI. And so for them to explain how we should be skeptical and how the use of AI or the abuse of AI is affecting and in some ways limiting scientific progress was really fantastic. So
Yeah.
we had a good time.
And bonus, yeah, we had a great time. They're wonderful people. I think we would be fast friends if we met. And they also shared their discoveries of the week. And so
Mm-hmm.
we have a four-part discovery of the week. Only are three food related or two? I forget. Anyhow, they're
You
great
know,
discoveries of
no,
the week.
they
Yeah.
had important discoveries. You and I talked
Yeah,
about
yeah,
food.
you and we were
But
the hedonists. They were the smart people. But anyhow, without any further ado, we're going to turn this over to the interview, and it gets a little. It goes everywhere you want it to go, and it's a fantastic interview, and you can see the rapport that they have. And here we go. So we're joined today by two wonderful guests, Iris Van Roy and Olivia Guest, appropriately named, to talk a little bit about AI and about a position paper that they and a set of their colleagues put out recently about the AI, why academic systems and academia in general should take a much more skeptical view of AI technology adoption. And this paper has been widely read, widely shared, and we wanted to talk to these folks because they've also been involved in some discussions about AI in the scientific claims space, and these two things overlap. So welcome, Olivia and Iris. It's nice to have you.
Nice to be here.
Thanks for having us.
yeah, welcome.
So if you don't mind, can you tell us just a little bit about yourselves and your authorship team and how this position paper came together?
Oh yeah. How this position paper came together. Wow, wow, wow. What a question. Long story. I will try and make it as short as possible. Yeah, so we both work in a cognitive science and AI department and broadly teach AI undergraduates and master students. And so we have exposure to what I guess people think about AI and how people use AI or how people even use the term AI and so on and so forth. And I guess what we've been seeing in the past few years is that far from being an academic, I don't know, phrase or jargon or field, it's also, yeah, an area in the tech sector in the technology company's portfolio, I guess, where they pump out various claims, various products, and this, I guess, collectively, you could say this is called AI hype, and this is corrosive and even harmful. As you can imagine, I mean, most people, I think, completely understand that companies don't have students or academics' best interests at heart necessarily. And we've been, yeah, like I said, we've been seeing in the past few years frames that are not really scientific or academic being accepted by our students, by our colleagues, by our employers broadly. by the field or the various fields, in fact, that contribute to artificial intelligence, like psychology, cognitive science, computer science. And the reason why we wrote this position piece is because there was really no position, there was really no sort of valid, I guess, even frame, so deeper than a position in a way, frame in order to give a position that goes counter to these claims, except, of course, to just say no. But the point is, saying no still requires the opportunity, like the ability to answer no to, consensually say no to something kind of implies that you've been asked. And we never even felt that we were asked. We felt that these chatbots or other AI products just appeared in Microsoft Outlook in our case, and I'm sure many other
Yeah, that's
software.
that's one of the more
Yeah.
interesting things about this particular hype cycle, right? Is it's not it's an imposed hype cycle in a way. I mean, it just shows Gemini just shows up here and there, and whatever the sidecar thing is that I've shut off in Microsoft products, and things, and Apple Intelligence just is forced into products, and why do you think to me that almost has a whiff of desperation about it? So why do you think companies are forcing these things into products? There must be some motivation beyond just ideology or something like that.
Money.
Yeah, just
Yes.
yeah. And I
Right.
think that that's also happened in the scientific publishing space too, right? There's been just a rapid injection of AI technologies, and that's kind of what led to that imposition of AI technologies. I think is really an important point not to lose track of. Like you said, there really wasn't a request for input or even academic assessment of these products before they were imposed on people.
So so what the two of you experienced and your colleagues is that tools that you use and your students use to do their work on a daily basis were injected with AI stuff that started to compromise your or their abilities to discern what is good or what is bad. Is that a fair summation of how this technology coming from commercial companies entered the academic space in a way that was jarring and unexpected?
Maybe it's useful. Also, as Olivia explained, that the context in which we teach is actually an artificial intelligence program. And I think the impact of AI hype on the AI students also is a bit unique and also special because this is the expertise that they're learning about in their academic education. And it certainly had an impact, and maybe we can also say more about this specifically. What I'm observing is more university level, that there's a normalization of offloading cognitive labor to these kinds of tools. Although I think we also write about this in the paper, there's something to be said to even reject the frame that these are tools. And for instance, yeah, I also wrote about, so this also going a little bit back to the motivation. When 2022 sort of this hype started, I also was quite, puzzled, dismayed about how the academic community really seemed to uncritically right away adopt these products. I think academics didn't push back sufficiently, or as I would expect of academia, because it's actually our jobs to critically reflect and to protect scientific integrity and scientific independence. And that now, several years later, even so far as that trainings are offered to teachers to use these products in a way that I think is antithetical to the whole enterprise of academia and of science. But also, and this circles back to our unique context, not involving actually people with expertise in artificial intelligence um, to, yeah, to make decisions about these technologies and whether or not we actually want to adopt them, or if we were to adopt technologies. Of course, we use lots of technologies in our science. I mean, we're now also on a
Right.
computer.
So
Uh,
one of the things I want to just interject if I could. One of the things you talk about is that this seems like a part of a broader assault on academia in general. So do you think that that exclusion of academics at the early phase was a whiff of that disdain for academics that this technology seems to represent as well?
I think the situation with a disdain for academics or a kind of wave of anti-intellectualism probably has been going longer than the current AI summer or hype cycle. I think there's a lot of tropes, at least, for example, in the UK, there's the trope of like the lazy student. That's a very common trope. I don't know what other countries have, but I'm sure these kind of tropes exist, or the out of touch academic, or the
Mhm.
sort of the academics are sort of another one is, I think, against new things. But some
Right.
of these
Or
tropes are just
in the US, it's the
silly.
academic elite, right? And so,
Yeah, yeah, very true. But I mean, I also some of these may even be true, but the
Mhm.
point is how they're weaponized,
Yeah.
right? And I think that the idea of like the sort of confused, out of touch, backwards, even academic is a very interesting trope in this context because, of course, all of these technologies, especially mathematical, statistical ones like artificial neural networks or large language models or generative AI, whatever label is, big data, whatever label is fashionable. These are created by academics, and if not directly created by academics, by people who have degrees who were provided by a university and so on, right? And on and on. Like there's no doubt that academics are involved in innovating and in producing knowledge and
Mhm.
whatever other parts of society contribute to the tech sector. The role of academia and the role of the academic in producing knowledge, I think, is very clear. So when that comes into contact with a trope that, for example, I am against technology, or I think this is a very interesting rhetorical frame that maybe our colleagues get trapped in.
Mm.
And I think this is part of it. So when you see people claiming that, oh, academics are technophobic or these specific people are against progress, this is all a very strange way of speaking because, of course, there are technologies that we should be scared of. There are things that we should push back against, and also we've really been here before. Like, for example, academia's entanglement with the tobacco industry or the petrochemical industry or big pharmaceutical companies. I mean, these are all known problematic, uh, even prescribed in some cases, conflicts of interest. So I
Mhm.
don't see what the difference is with, a new form of that. And by the way, it's not even that new, but you get the point that
right,
these are
right.
all
Yeah.
impositions on the impartiality of academia, and that itself is a really corrosive frame. And when people who work in AI departments or related university departments are essentially bought out by the tech sector, there is no unbiased opinion anymore. And when those conflicts of
Mhm.
interest are also secret because they're not perceived by the academic community as conflicts of interest, of course, for obvious reasons, because that's part of the conflict of interest,
Mhm.
then there is no way to fight against such a I don't know, like a form of damage to academic practices and scholarly work.
Right. And this gets to a point you make in the paper that is that, the ability to identify the problems with AI is equivalent to success as scientists and educators. I mean, that is to be able to tackle this area with skepticism and with the kind of thoroughness and care that academics typically bring to their work is now part of being a successful scientist or educator. It's not that this, like you said before, it's not like these are just tools that you can just pick up and use with absolute certainty, like pipettes or something like that. This is something you really have to analyze and understand what is going on here and where it applies, if it even does, right? So one of the other things you mentioned in the paper is you said these tools can open the door to pseudoscience. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you came to that conclusion or position?
I really like the term pseudoscience, so I'm glad it's in your question because I think it really kind of underlines the problem because it's quite an extreme term, at least to bandy about as an academic or a scientist. So I think that the reason it leaves the door open to pseudoscience, there's many, but I think the main one is that the outputs of these models aren't as claimed, which means that, for example, if you use such a model to perform a literature review, let's say, or to what's the other thing people use it for sometimes? Oh yeah, to bounce ideas off of, which is another strange purported application. Um, you're not conversing with a colleague, and you're not conversing with, I guess, a mentee who might help you do a literature review, or yourself directly doing literature review. So this is, if the body of work that you produce isn't connected to the literature because your references are made up or have no relation to what you're writing about, both of these two things happen all the time, that doesn't meet the standards of academic work. So that's already a huge problem. And then to add on to that, these models are consistently shown, and for very good reason, and in principle reason. So also the fact that it's been shown a handful or even many times is already enough, because it's an in principle problem that it's shown to produce, for example, completely biased results in favor of, for example, just men, or just certain papers in a specific subfield. So even if it does get them right, it's still a very biased selection. And this is completely damaging to, for example, a literature review, which is a cornerstone of starting out actual scientific work. So it's basically, it looks as if you've done the work, but you haven't. And that is a prototypical pseudoscientific strategy, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty
And I don't know if
fraudulent.
Iris wants to add anything to
I
that,
would
but yeah,
like,
go
I
ahead.
have an excellent example of this that I accidentally ran into on social media. And this was a previous paper from Olivia and me, reclaiming AI as a theoretical tool for corporate science. And I ran into an AI-generated summary of this paper that was shared to advertise it. I mean, it was meant presumably positively. And the only thing I got right was the title. And the summary had the wrong journal, the wrong publication date, and it changed the authors. And maybe not coincidentally, it took off all the women authors, and it plugged in another male author with whom I more often publish. And so this was circulated as a summary of the paper, which of course is complete misinformation and a distortion. But it's also very interesting that this is considered, because related to progress and the idea of we can automate science, we can generate automated summaries. Like, we have a summary because this person presumably had the paper in front of them with the correct title and the authors, and an abstract written as long as their summary written by the authors. And I think it's very interesting that, which is related to the skin, that the idea is we don't read anymore just the abstract that the author gives themselves, but somehow maybe a mystical belief that if this is run through some AI system and some regurgitated text, that this is better, even though it's just nonsense what comes out and biased.
Well, and that relates to your earlier point about this notion, both within corporate and now academia, of that it's a good thing to offload the cognitive labor to a machine. And when you're talking about AI summaries, plain language summaries, we've seen this in medicine too. It's don't make people read and understand what they're reading. We should just give a machine generated
Well, there are so
summary.
many
Why do
tropes
we
about
need
generations,
this?
that didn't grow up reading, generations that didn't grow up. I remember back when the internet was brand new and people said these children won't know how to write sentences and know how. I mean, there were just all these doom and gloom things. And this is the most writing centric generation I've ever seen because all they do is write to each other, and they have all sorts of fancy ways of texting and emailing and blog posting and all that stuff. It's such a writing generation. So we get a lot of things wrong with these tropes. The other thing that is kind of gloomy about this is that there's so much regurgitation, as you said, that it's almost like we stagnate, right? And that's very anti-scientific. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, and about surrendering our autonomy and even our optimism about the future to this group of technology uh, advocates. So, or do you not share that feeling? I'm just curious.
I mean, I think I share this feeling. It depends exactly what we mean on the stagnating part, but I certainly think that in general, these models, so basically any statistical model, and these are statistical models, have the tendency, for good reason, just not when they misused, to kind of homogenize how they see uh, yeah, how the output is such that it is a much more homogenized version than the input. And this is not it's certainly a feature. It's just that it's maybe a completely unwanted feature when we're talking about human creativity or understand. Because I mean, the thing is, when you want to understand, let's say, a research paper, you want to understand that research paper. You don't want to smooth it over and be like, oh, like every research paper, this one has a title, because that's not what you're interested in. And in order for these models to work, in fact, for perhaps for the purpose they were intended, they require, essentially the removal of outliers and all these other statistical smoothing techniques. So it does mean that uniqueness is filtered out, and certainly the output is a function of the input, which is completely different to human creativity, where presumably, I hope no one thinks that, I don't know, uh, mugs or some other random human invention have existed from the Big Bang, right? Like we have created like new things, even if
Right,
they're
right, right, right.
banal.
Right, and
So
like you
so
say,
I
with
think,
human
yeah, go
creativity,
ahead.
like one of your sentences, I think you did it on social media. I'm not sure where it came about, but
Mm,
it fires things in people's minds, right? So the sentence that I just loved of yours was, "Correlation is not cognition."
mhm,
And a
mhm.
lot of people really sparked at that. And that's how human creativity works. It can be one 3-word phrase in a paper that you happen to read, and all of a sudden it takes you out and you
Yeah,
start going down a path that you didn't expect to go down that day. And maybe it even changes your career. But these homogenized, as you said, systems that flatten all the information into, a glob, you miss those flinty moments of connection with another mind that you go, oh wow, that one really hit. So yeah, it's awesome.
And I think on the point of the surrendering autonomy to a small group of people, I mean, I think it's even scarier than that, because it's even surrendering basically everything as an academic. So not just autonomy, but everything. Because if
Right,
your scientific
identity.
output
Yep.
is mediated through, if your thoughts are mediated through a machine, and your scientific, and that machine is a homogenizing machine, so not
mhm.
just texting and then what I type appears on the screen, but it's fed through a system or whatever. I mean, this is very, very scary. So not just that you can't give correct attribution to the input, because of course the input was the output, of human cognition. The input to the LLM is the output of human cognition, right? You can't do that because the LLM intervenes there, and it also intervenes at your output too. And then you realize also these LLMs are controlled by companies. I mean, I think this is quite dystopian.
Yeah, I also am so surprised, and it's that academics buy into that regurgitating the past is progress, or
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
indeed, knowledge, scientific knowledge, it's new knowledge. It's not, this is also what students learn in the first year at the university. It's not about learning what's in the textbook. It's learning to ask new questions that people haven't asked before, thinking of new methodologies of trying to answer these scientific questions. And it's certainly not regurgitating the past. And then I think it's interesting, right, that being critical of these systems is considered anti-progress. Whereas how can regurgitating the past be progress?
Yeah, well, now that I have two experts on the phone, sorry, Joy, I just want to jump in with a question that you and I have had assumed we know the answer to, but now I'm going to ask, and maybe I'll get totally derailed in my assumptions. But regurgitation is also, they're drinking their own bathwater, right? So ultimately, they're producing content that they're going to ingest again and slowly degrade the whole space. Is that true?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
probably true. I mean, I think that the very specifics of each type of model can, it can, if they train on their own output, that is also something that you need the technical details of the model to really understand exactly what will happen. But in the general case, if uh, if these models, as the companies claim, have been trained on essentially all of accessible digitized human data, we can already know from that, well, we're not, if all of accessible human data is, say, I don't know, from the 90s to now, because that's what we've been digitizing, and obviously we've digitized things, whatever, from ancient Greece. But the point is, it's not as if we're going to find loads of new things to digitize. So probably the rate of increase of human data accessible for them to steal is going to be not as much as they need to make all the strange claims they make about these systems dramatically improving from where they are now. So let's assume they've used up everything, and then all we have is this kind of mirror. It's basically a mirror. It's a statistical mirror of this vast amount of data. Um, Once you start realizing that that's what this is, you start to see, well, it can't, all it can do is perform, metaphorically or literally, however you want to think about it, a search over this mirror. But a search over the mirror of the past, or yeah, a search over a representation of human digital data. This can also be done other ways, and it can also be done by us creatively, which is probably what we do when we do a literature review. So it also, it sometimes baffles me that people think this is something special and unique in terms of, oh, we found these amazing, behavioral patterns in this model. And I just think to myself, yeah, sure, this is human data. So you're going to find something interesting being output by a statistical model applied over all of human data. There'll be loads of interesting things there. We're interesting creatures.
Well, and even they have AIs now looking at, claiming to find novel proteins or novel enzymes. And scientists in those spaces are saying, yeah, they're novel, but they're not useful and they can't be made and there's no application for them. And so, again, for the hype cycle, they change the frame, as you say, to make it so that everything they do sounds wonderful. And that's just not true. But I'm sorry, Iris, you were going to say something?
Yeah, but I also was very interested to respond to this. So I think in terms of, it's related also to this point of search, like you can have very domain specific applications, maybe in science, um, biology or physics, And if you set up as scientist your search space and you very clearly define this is the space, and yeah, sure, you can automate it, you can use algorithms to search that theoretical space. And I guess this is also, for instance, with protein folding. But also, I think sometimes if we have, it's actually related to maybe Olivia wants to talk about it later, another paper from hers on what is human-centered AI. What do we call AI? If this is any offloading or trying to offload some of our cognitive labor, yeah, we do this all the time with all kinds of tools. Also, when scientists do, for instance, computer simulations, of course, they set up the conditions of the simulation such that they also, whatever comes out, they can interpret it in some meaningful way. But then to say, hey, we have here useful domain-specific cases where some form of using computer programs to inform science, to infer that AI systems can interpret scientific literature and come up with creative. These are completely disconnected. And this, I think this is very important for people to understand. Yes, you can have, we know this also from the history of AI, you can have very domain-specific AI systems that may be able to do reliably within this domain certain things. The big problem is that we cannot create reliable domain general AI systems. We haven't been able to, and also some of our work suggests we won't be able to before the sun dies out.
The search and retrieval part of a scientist's work is important, and it's making me think about, like, are people trying to take a shortcut to use AI in a way that you might have leaned on your friendly neighborhood research librarian to help you cast the net on a subset of literature that maybe would take you out of your discipline or things like that. I mean, it comes down to who somebody's asking the question, and then there's a mechanical process of bringing together potentially supporting information or informative ways to help you answer that question.
And that gets
Yeah.
to the kind of how the question's asked too, in a way, because one of the things that a good research librarian or good colleague might do is say, yeah, I don't think you're asking the question in quite the right way. But an AI system is always going to accept your query string and put together something to try to satisfy you. And that query string may be, banal, may be trite, may be wrong-headed, but you need that, even the expertise intervening at the beginning, I think would make a difference. Does that
I think,
resonate with
yeah,
you?
I mean, yes. And I think there's at least two things going on, I think. So one is that when anyone, a child, a researcher, anyone goes to a library, they're going to or indeed further, asking a librarian, they're doing this, but even going to a library, actually, they're doing this because they want an expert to have selected a selection of books for them to then pick, well, whatever, one or many to read, right? So when a university library has I don't know, a cognitive science section, that those books have been selected, in fact, not even just by the librarian, actually by the working academics as well, and like the relevant community and the librarian and so on. And there's a reason you go to the library in this context. It's because you don't want to accidentally read an inappropriate book. Is actually that's the kind of bottom line assumption, and this is why libraries are incredibly important, right? But then on the other side, another issue that seems to be the case is that the model seems to masquerade as a human as opposed to a search engine, because you could also use the library search engine, right? But the library search engine is actually no different to showing up at the library and looking at the correct section. That it's no different, because presumably it will list the books that are in your university library first, and then
Yeah.
that is the same as the bookshelf. So if this model doesn't just, and a lot of them don't just, we know that, list biased, whatever, like list the top white guys in your field. It doesn't just do that. It does something even worse, which is, like you say, if you argue back, it doesn't stand its ground. But of course, a librarian or an expert would.
Right.
Yep, absolutely. And one of the things that you brought to mind about asking questions. So, do you know who Randall Munroe is? The XCD
Oh,
thing?
XKCD.
XKCD guy, yeah. So he has these great books and he takes radically weird questions and then answers them scientifically. And the opening question to his latest book was from a child who asked, "What if the solar system were filled with soup out to Jupiter?" And he takes like 10 pages with illustrations and answers the question. And he comes to the conclusion that tomato soup would be the most worrisome, and how long you could live inside the soup if you were off planet or on planet, and how big the resulting black hole, where the event horizon would be, how much of the galaxy it would consume, and all of that. And that's how you answer a question, right? That he's like the exemplar for answering a question in a way that's engaging, thorough, scientific, and all that. But like you said, science is about discovery and asking questions that haven't been asked before. And I don't think anybody's asked what would happen if the solar system were filled with soup out to Jupiter. So good for that kid. I hope that person becomes a great scientist someday. But you ended with with 5 core principles for using these technologies responsibly, and I just wanted to ask you to reflect on those and how you and your colleagues came to those, and what you think that a wider adoption of those might help accomplish.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, it is interesting because we actually did not propose these 5 principles.
Hmm.
These 5 principles are the 5 principles in the Netherlands Code of Conduct for Research Integrity, and which is a code by which all researchers, at least at universities and other research institutes in the Netherlands that also signed it, which all the universities did, or sort of commit to this. All researchers are bound by these principles, and I think it's very interesting that this is not self-evident for at least our colleagues in the Netherlands. And yeah, so what we did there is actually take these 5 principles. Let me see: honesty, scrupulousness, transparency, independence, and responsibility, and say, hey, if we look through these principles at usages of AI systems in science, what follows naturally? And this is what we describe in the paper. Yeah.
Well played. Well played. I like it. So I think, Joy, do you have other questions? Otherwise, I wanted to kind of ask you, what's the reaction been like to your paper?
Oh,
Other than
okay.
you blow up social media every day that you do
It
something
is.
on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think
Positive.
it's important to put the reaction in context, because I do think, yes, of course, it's incredibly unusual and impressive to have, I think now we're on 33,000 views and maybe 20,000 downloads. This is already in and of itself. I've never seen, I don't know, like more than 2,000 views maybe on a preprint. I mean, I'm happy
Hmm.
to stand corrected, but even if there are higher averages, I've still never seen this kind of number. So obviously this is yeah, promising. But I also think, yeah, to put it really into context, um normally when I put a paper out or a preprint out, um I get, obviously I get fewer views, because yeah, this is why these views are impressive. But I also get quite a mix of reactions. I do get abuse. And I think what's interesting, so I think the previous preprint that I put out, someone called me an idiot. They said, "You're an idiot." And I don't, to be honest, it kind of just rolls over me, and I just forget about it, and I just shrug, and it depends who it comes from. But in general, I would say, yeah, there's some verbal abuse. uh, Never with these interactions has there been, like an overwhelming positive reaction. This has been an overwhelming
Oh,
positive. So
that's
this is
great.
itself, I think, in a way, maybe more unusual that the ratio of kind of good to bad or positive to abusive reactions. I don't think I've been called any names. I mean, I'm sure behind my back I have, but that's a given. Uh, but it's very interesting. This is a very interesting phenomenon to me. And I think another thing to point out here before I let Iris say how she's experiencing it, I think another thing is that it does seem to be the case that when people express, disagreement, which I don't take as a negative thing, just to be clear, it's different. Obviously, disagreement is not abuse. It does seem to be that it's always men. So that's something to think about. But yeah, Iris, I don't know what you wanted to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was the first point I wanted to say, that these interactions are definitely gendered. I experience indeed also very positive compared to also my own experiences, also with some work, of course, together with Olivia. Yeah, overall, very positive responses. Even multiple people contacting us, thanking us, also in private, but also some in public, as you can see, saying, "Oh, I'm sharing this with my department head. Oh, we just heard top down, there's going to be new AI strategy. I'm sharing it with university governance." And this is very heartening to hear. Of course, I mean, this is also why Olivia also endeavored to have this out at the start of the academic year. It's very heartening to see this is helping also other people, because we also feel, I think also elsewhere, Olivia says, now or never, or if we, yeah, the longer we wait, the harder it will be to undo the damage that these systems and the normalization of the use of it is doing to our institutions. And we write about that in the paper too. I really feel it's hollowing out our institutions from the inside, and it's de-skilling both teachers and students, and I see this as really sort of what is it? I don't know the expression, downward cycle or something
A
like.
vicious cycle.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle, but really, like, so yeah, it just gets worse and worse. But also people become less able to still catch it, because for this, yeah, you need to uphold your knowledge and your expertise, but that at the same time is being destroyed. So I also feel we are losing the knowledge and skill to recognize what these developments are doing to our own institution, and this really worries me. But positive reception of the paper.
Well, I'm so thrilled that you got more positive receptions than negative, and that's not surprising to me, because you did an incredible job of taking something that's been blown out of proportion in many different spheres for different reasons, and like you said, you just grounded it in 5 simple principles. Don't and anyone could understand that. Even I can. I'm not a scientist or academic, or it's like, so I'm sure it's been a breath of fresh air, and a tool that people can use to make sense of what's going on, not only with the imposition of AI within the things that people are using every day, but also in the context of the literature that you need to do your jobs. It's existing there as well.
Well,
And so
I
these
think,
two
yeah.
things are bumping up against each other in a way that must be incredibly frustrating or scary for academic inquiry.
Yeah,
At
I
least
mean, I think
way.
something that is genuinely really scary, like I'm actually very uh worried about it, is that I see really basic academic skills, like for example, knowing how to follow uh correct citation styles, given let's say you have to use, I don't know, APA um, referencing manual. It seems as if the students don't know how to do that. And of course, it could be the case that they do know, but they're using an LLM which doesn't know, because of course it doesn't know anything. But isn't that the same as not knowing? So I think, and this is very scary, because what it means is that essentially, if we can't connect our research output, because imagine I'm a student who's just graduated and I want to do a master's, or I'm writing a thesis or whatever. If I can't connect what I've written to the rest of the literature, it's such a basic academic skill. I don't even know, do I have time as a professor to teach this? Because this should have been taught at the very early stages of someone's academic career. If they're already very advanced in potentially other skills or other knowledge, and they have this missing, it's almost as if, where is the correction? Who's going to do the correction for this person's lack of ability to, say, follow a reference manual or know how to for example, the thing Iris said about knowing that you can read the abstract to understand what's in a paper. Yeah, for me, this is really scary, because it's a really basic skill, as opposed to, say, for example, someone being tricked by the output. Because of course, someone being tricked by the output, I think even a seasoned academic could be tricked by the output, because it's by design. It's designed to do that. But I mean, I don't think anyone designed it to de-skill knowing how to reference. But this is clearly a result.
And it seems like it's changing the goalposts for what are qualifications to do all sorts of different jobs. And with this supposed AI easy button that people can press to skip over things that were learned skills or tools that were created for a reason to give you context and so forth. That's being changed almost daily, and that's what's very um, disconcerting for how do we evaluate the important human inputs that we're learning and that we're also using in our jobs.
And I think what you're saying is so important, which is exactly why it is attacked by the people who have an incentive to attack this frame. Because I think what happens quite often is that they reframe what you say to make it general, to say, oh, but does that mean I have to be an expert in everything? So you're saying I need to have every single skill? And it's like completely the opposite, which is that experts want to maintain their skills. So, for example, no one is expected to know, well, except of course the experts, but no one is expected to know, I don't know, how to fix their own car. No one, there's a profession that fixes cars. No one is expected to, I don't know, do their own plumbing. There is a profession that does plumbing. And in fact, all of these professions, including academics with the five core principles and many other things, have internal and external regulations exactly on their skill level or the type of skills, right? So when people try to counter the, say, oh, but we are against automation. We're not against automation at all. I have a Roomba, like whatever. This is not what this is about. This is about people whose job it is to have those skills. And I think something that maybe, it depends, of course, on people's perspective, but something that maybe can help people understand this if they're struggling, is to think about skills that are maybe far away from them, that they depend on, or that are highly valued. And one example that I really like is the example of the seamstress or the tailor. Everyone knows that tailored clothes, bespoke clothes, are better. That's why rich people buy them. Everyone knows they're better. They fit better. They last longer. They're better. They're exactly what you want, right? You get exactly what you want. Everyone knows that. No one would confuse like a fast fashion unfortunately, child labor, slave labor item of clothing with bespoke, I don't know, whatever, woolen suit. No one would think that those. I mean, you could think they're the same, but the point is, once you learn about the difference, you would never
Right.
confuse
You'd
them
spot it.
again.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's exactly the same with every other skill.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. I mean, part of AI is like it's like TLDR, taken to scale, right? And the
Yeah.
other thing I've found, and Joy and I, when researching our book and doing all those things and continuing to do, is that reading something really carefully going through something with a highlighter and with all that, it can surprise you what someone, maybe they missed an argument, maybe they kind of choked on a logical step, and you can catch those things. And those are really important for the dialogue that academics need to have writ large and specific to things. And to your point, I think there's been sort of a science washing attitude in technology that if they just put technology, excuse me, through science, they'll flatten science. And we talked about this earlier, they'll platform it. And then and then science loses all its special nature, because astronomy is very different from anthropology, which is very different from pediatrics, which is very different from mechanical engineering. And those fields have their own cultures, their own rules, their own customs, their own goals. And we can't flatten these things out. And general AI does that, to your point, Iris, earlier, where, specific AI, maybe. General, no, thank you.
It's also not possible. Maybe it's nice to share on this point that I've started again last week teaching actually computational modeling to AI students. And make very clear that they cannot they cannot offload the cognitive work of making models. Of course, for some of that may be surprising, because they would like to take data and then train a model on it. And I say, no, this is uh, here, I'm not going to give you, like, modeling is not trying to reproduce what models look like out there. It's for you to develop the cognitive skill of developing models for your specific scientific purposes. And we actually, going back to the reading, uh, we actually take a paper. It's a quite challenging paper for them. I also asked them, is it hard? And then, yeah, 80% says very hard. I says, good, because we're going to discuss it in 2 classes together to figure out what did the author really mean, what do you think about it, etc. And why we're doing this is because you need to train your conceptual muscles. That's what you're learning here, so that later on in the course, and you learn all kinds of skill, then you can start to make your own theoretical models. And so this, I think, goes back to the earlier point about the reading. I think many colleagues may think, oh, because these products are out there, we have to change. We have to change what we teach, or maybe less reading, or maybe less essays, or maybe. Whereas our stance is, no, they need more. Not to say, oh, no, I'm not going to any essays. No, engage in conversation about the reading, also to show them it's about developing, your own cognitive skills. That's what it means to be an academic expert in some domain. You need knowledge, but you also need skills.
And I think that's why you've probably gotten pretty uniform positive responses, is because what you're saying ultimately is pro-human and it's very optimistic in a way that, we got this, and it's pro-science and pro just being academic and thoughtful and critical and all those good things that we're supposed to be, right?
Mhm.
I'm
Well, I
really
can't.
struck by, oh, sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm really struck by your take on why it's positive. That itself makes me feel, um, yeah, I don't know. I like it when you said anthropology is different to whatever other example you said, astronomy, and they're all scientific endeavors. And I think that really underlines how anti-science statistical thinking can be if turbocharged, because of course anthropologists and astronomers and psychologists, we all people, just to be clear, we all see the same stuff. Like we're all going to university, sitting on a chair, or we're all doing the same kinds of stuff. And yet we study such dramatically different phenomena. We all see the sky, but we're not all astronomers, right? So I think, and that's the beauty of it, isn't it? We're all experiencing reality, and yet clearly we are picking out such dramatically different things from reality. So the idea of homogenizing everything, that's just already what's out there. Like what's out there is already a mess, and we're carving it.
Yeah, I think that's why it's resonating with people is it's like, no, wait, you can't just stop flattening us. Stop,
Yeah.
stop platforming us. Let's go back and actually talk to each other and all that good stuff. But Joy, I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
Well, as it relates to scientific publishing, and I can't we can't end this conversation without hearing more about your interaction with a certain customer service at a publisher, Iris. But the reason scientific publishing has exploded over the last 50 years is the ability of different disciplines to start to branch off, for different communities to come together, for different connections to be made between different communities. And so these publishers have been supporting the growth of science and scholarship through these different branches, through these different communities. And it seems so counterintuitive to try to flatten them all and to try to and apply of machine interpretation to what has come before, rather than supporting the continued growth along these different branches that turn into the new breakthroughs, the real disruption. The real disruption is when you find something that's different, that so nobody else has asked that question or have put these two things together. And so that's what's perplexing about the business strategies of these publishers versus what the potential could and should be if they didn't embrace this.
Yeah, many points in there.
Sorry.
So maybe to unpick them separately, is this a good place to maybe also say something about the observations about AI slop?
Mhm.
Yes, please.
that I made. Yeah, so indeed, I ran into what was it? Oh yeah, I was researching something from my expertise, and I was looking for what was it? I think domain general cognition, and I was trying to find literature to see how do different scientists define this, because of course, I mean, I also know, and because I've been in this field, I have an idea of. Well, I was curious in this, and then I ran accidentally into a page with an I only found out later an AI summary, but first I read it and I was like, that's a very odd description. Uh, and then I saw, I said, I've never seen this. I also cannot imagine you would think of it this way. And then I saw it was AI generated, said below, with a link. And I thought, okay, maybe this is a very idiosyncratic um, interpretation of these authors. But then I went in the paper, and it's not even an accurate reflection of the paper. Of course, I should not be surprised, because this is what I wanted to say, also on the term machine interpretation. I think it's very important for us to also make clear to the public there is no such thing as machine interpretation. Machines don't interpret. We can interpret. The machine generates strings of letters
Right. Yeah, the
based on
anthropomorphism
statistical.
of AI is astounding when you really start to pick it apart.
What was
Every word is like hallucination. No, that means it actually has a non-hallucinating state, and it doesn't. I'm sorry to have interrupted, but it just drives me nuts when all this misdirection is to anthropomorphize machines.
Well, we
Yeah.
saw one the other day that a private funder is investing in some scientific research to think like a cell, which we how many brains do your cells have?
Well, they were talking
Very
about
sound.
how the cell had been through trauma. And so
Yes.
we were like,
How
is
do
this machine going to go there and get, oh, little cell, who hurt you? Who hurt
yeah.
you?
But no, seriously, and it was in pursuit of healing, you know. So if you can,
Yeah, but
yeah.
I just want to say really to interject before we go back to Iris's story. I think this is itself like even the anthropomorphic terms that maybe we need, right? Like table leg, maybe that's needed. The fact that they misuse language so much is itself like it's corrosive because it basically means that every word they use is has a purpose to
Mm-hmm.
confuse, whereas table leg doesn't. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
table leg has no intention to confuse you.
Yeah, it
But of
just
course,
points you to what
if
part of the table to look at, right? The one that
yeah, yeah,
touches the
exactly.
ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Indeed. And
Exactly. Whereas like if everything about the table was not was all named, like the table, I don't know, has a back, has
Mm-hmm.
eyes, then you would all start to question like, are they trying to make me empathize with the table? So I think it's also that it's so consistent how they misuse language. But yeah, sorry, Iris, back to you.
completely with you. Um, Yeah, and of course, it's the whole strategy that in this case, as opposed to the table, the storyline is we can replace cognition. And so all these words for cognition, interpretation, hallucination, reasoning, learning, but
Thinking.
even summary, I object to because I don't think these systems summarize. They don't summarize. When we read something, we process it in relation to our background knowledge, also a goal why we were reading it. And when we summarize, we get the gist or the meaning or the points. And these systems cannot do this. They only can generate sentences based on some statistical properties of the data they were trained on and this input. And I think it is very useful when we also improve or are more careful in how we talk. So sometimes we can do these shorthands, but indeed, it's very easy to slip. And people, especially people without the expertise, such as we have both in cognitive science and AI, they may attribute these capacities to these systems. And this is, I think, also an important point that I would like to share, is that we see many also critical perspectives on AI, and these are all very valid and important, and we support them from ecological perspective, from social justice perspectives. What we observe is that often, even in such critical reflections, all kinds of abilities are granted to these systems that the systems don't actually have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we think it's also very important to deconstruct this because, yeah, many false claims are made about what these systems can do, such as summarize. So back to the story, maybe on AI slop.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I saw that. I found this, well, supposed, well, this AI generated text. And I searched a little bit more, and then I saw indeed that in articles there were all these links on words. So there was I was just reading, and then and also going again to yeah, generated text. I do in quotation marks summaries. Some for the same words generating completely different so-called definitions. Um, And yeah, I shared this online. So I, with my colleagues, look here. And of course, there was yeah, I shared how the experts responded to this. And this was beautiful because instantly people in my area saw that this was slop, that this was just misinformation. But I also realized that if you're not an expert in the area, this looks completely plausible. It's very difficult, I think, even the students in the area to recognize what's wrong with it.
Mhm.
Also, some asked me, because I shared this there, some asked me, what is? And I say, yeah, that's the thing. It's not possible for me to say exactly, I can say this is nonsense. And I think this is why these practices of publishers are so corrosive, because I think often non-experts will be reading the slop and they may think this is a quick, easy summary. It's accessible for me, and not realize that what they're getting is complete false non-information.
Yeah, I think this is the scariest thing. I think it's called, maybe it has like this name, Gelman amnesia, I think, which is that when you read a news story or something that you know about because it's about your neighborhood or whatever, oh, but this is not really how it happened. Or if it's in your expertise, you're like, okay, this is completely wrong. But then when you read news stories that are about other geographic areas or other areas of expertise, you forget that if you felt like that about the thing that you know a lot about, then other people will feel like that about, and so on. And I think for me, what is really scary is that we kind of see this already happening because, for example, there are scientific terms, in fact, in the exact scientific terms that we use to talk about these systems, but also in general. Like, for example, people use algorithm decoratively, basically. This is very scary because it's a very, very formal term.
Mhm.
It's so formal. Like it can't be more formal. It's maths. Like it has a definition and it means it also has in its definition, it says finite. So when people use the word algorithm about to describe things that are clearly, well, first of all, not fully formal, so they cannot be algorithms, but also things that clearly are not finite, I just think, okay, so we're just using words now. And of course, the public is allowed to say anything they want. I'm not trying to prescribe, they can say algorithm for anything they feel like. But the point is, when academics do it, this is the whole point of jargon is to facilitate communication on very specific things. I mean, isn't this the whole point why scientists like data and numbers? Because like
Mhm.
5 is different to 4 and so on.
Mhm.
So this is very scary, and we see exactly this happening, this corrosion happening to terms that describe these systems too. And of course, algorithm is one of them, but other ones as well, like large language model. What makes it large? The cutoff is not clear. Or artificial neural network. What is it that makes it neural? Not clear. Or what's another example? Artificial intelligence. What is it that
Right.
makes it intelligence?
Well,
This
yeah,
is
a
not
lot of
clear.
it is kind of a marketing. It's more marketing than academic research. And I think there's been a kind of a predilection for people to, because we're surrounded by almost so much information as marketing, that people just kind of get lazy and it's just like, okay, I'll just use a marketing term. But yeah, there's a whole bunch going on here, and totally agree with that.
Would anybody be interested in sharing some discoveries?
We end each episode with a silly discovery of the week. So mine, if you don't have one, mine this week will be a maple creamy, which is a
Of what?
A maple creamy, which is I see. This is why it's a discovery of the week. So it's an ice cream treat particular to Vermont. It's maple ice cream sauce served in a spiral on a cone, and it's absolutely as you would expect. It's it's maple
Okay.
sweet ice cream.
And is it seasonal? It's not quite tapping
No, it's
the
regional.
tree.
It's
Okay, it's
regional. Yeah, it's
regional.
not seasonal, but just regional. Yeah. So you go up and I just never anticipated myself saying the words maple creamy.
Yeah, I don't know
Um,
that you should be saying that in this company.
What is this thing? Sorry, this is a tangent, but I'm very interested to know now that you said Vermont. What is this thing with Vermont and what is it? Like mountain lions? Is it
Mountain
just
lions.
no? Have I made this up?
I hope you have because
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know.
I
There's
took our
no,
dog out last night and I saw and it went after something and something ran away and I hope it wasn't a mountain lion.
no, but like in general, there's not many mountain lions. No.
No, I don't believe. I hope not.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
But
Maybe
now,
it's
but
just
now, it may be an AI hallucination.
an
I don't
AI
know.
mountain lion. Then you're safe.
That's right.
No mountain lions in the mountains, luckily.
Yeah. But if you don't have a discovery of the week, if one silly one comes to mind,
Um,
anything you came across this week where you're like, huh, I never thought I'd string those words together, or I never thought I'd buy something like that or see something like that happen.
I mean, I think my discovery of the week is just how surprised I am with the reception of this preprint, and also the fact that, I mean, I think a lot of journalists contacting us and people contacting us, I'm surprised because I think it is, yeah, I guess it just completely changes my view because of the lack of negative reaction. And also when I asked on Blue Sky why people like it, they said things that surprised me. Like, for example, they said, "Oh, well, one person said this, and I really appreciate this answer." So I don't want to sound flippant, but they said something like, "I don't really understand it, but I'm just happy that you said it." And I think that this surprises me. I'm genuinely surprised because I think in in my experience or in my impression of my experiences, I always feel that people don't like that. People want to have things that they understand. So I think that is, I need to think about what that means.
Mhm.
That's a good one. That's a nice
That's
discovery.
great.
Iris, does anything come to mind?
Yeah, I was thinking. So I guess one discovery for me is that being on a podcast can be fun. This was the first time I had this kind of conversation, and I enjoyed it, and I want to thank you for it.
Oh, that's
Oh, I want
terrific.
to add
Wow, you make
something
us
to
feel like
that.
seasoned pros.
Yeah, I want to add something to that, which is that I think you are really good at um, the kind of flow of the questions. Because I think quite often what happens is that people, maybe it's because, yeah, actually, I have no explanation, but I think that the flow of the questions is impressive. It's very different to how a journalist would ask the question. I think this is also
No,
maybe what Iris is hinting
Well,
at.
yeah.
maybe that's because we're not journalists, we're just curious nerds who
Mhm.
who want to learn more.
Good
And I'm happy
company.
because I was had one eye to the side waiting for my dog to bark, so I had to keep pressing mute. But anyhow, it's been fantastic spending time with you. You guys are terrific. We're big fans, and we'll put this
Thank
out
you.
and promote it, and hopefully keep the positive vibes coming back your way. And
You don't want to hear about my discovery
Yes,
of the week?
oh, I'm
please tell
sorry.
us.
I didn't. I'm the worst. Okay,
So
Joy, what's your discovery of the week?
thank you for asking. I thought you never would. My discovery of the week has to do, it was an obituary in the New York Times that jumped out at me because a man named Andrew Hughes from Tampa, Florida, passed away recently. And he was well known as being the historian of the Cuban sandwich. So if you're not familiar with Cuban sandwiches, they're very specific and they come from Cuba, we think. But he was an academic at the University of Tampa, and he really wanted to get to the bottom of it. You know, who really invented this, and what's the appropriate way to prepare one? And so he used his library and did his research and
Nice.
wrote a whole book about the history of the Cuban sandwich. So, for the
Well,
record, like I said, it comes from Havana, but there are a couple good places you can get one in Tampa or anywhere else that they have good panini presses.
that's fantastic. Now that's very narrow and slightly compressed scientific discipline, but a hot topic. I'm sorry. All right.
Oh, spicy, spicy.
All right. Once again, thanks everybody.